Today we'll go through 5 sampling techniques that can be used by any artist of all skill levels. For each one of these techniques, I will show you a different beat, and for some, we will even use my recreations of Kanye West songs. Starting off with the simplest one, the loop method. Okay, so the loop method is the simplest chopping technique, but don't get fooled by it. Just because it's simple doesn't mean you're not gonna be able to make good beats with it. It's still a very, very effective chopping technique. So quickly, just to show you an example, this is my remake of Kanye West's Hey Mama. He literally just grabbed one part of the sample, which is this part right here. And he just looped it over and over again, and that's pretty much the entirety of the song. He just added 2 drum sounds, a snare and a kick, and his own bass, and that's pretty much the entirety of the beat. Right, so that just proves the point that you don't need to have complex chopping techniques to make great beats, right? So to show off this technique, I sampled this song called Who Has the Last Laugh Now by Bloodstone, and it sounds like this. And so I literally just chopped out these 4 bars here, and I just looped them around. Right, next to process the sample, I just added a little bit of Cymatics Origin and a EQ to just cut out the low end. So both these plugins just take away a little bit of presence from the sample. So I have space to add my own instruments later on. So next what I did to show off the loop method even more is I literally just found this drum break sample. And I just grabbed a 2-bar section from it and just looped it around. So here is how that sounds with the sample. And to just beef up the drums a little bit more, I added an analog clip and a LA2A. So it just squeezes out a little bit more juice from the drums, so they just sound fuller. Next what I did is I just found this kick sound, and I just wanted to thicken up the first hit of every 2 bars, so it just has a little bit more punch at the beginning. It doesn't add a lot, but it still adds something. And lastly, I just used this bass sound and made this very simple pattern with it, which it basically just follows the sample. That's pretty much everything I did for the loop technique. If I just arrange everything out, here is how the loop technique beat sounds. I'm looking for my future, forgetting all of my past. Won't you tell me who has the last? So next up we got the bass chopping, and basically bass chopping is when you chop the sample based on what's happening with the bass. Okay, so let's start with the sample. So I used this song called Song of Goodbye by Luceni. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, I might have butchered it. So it's actually this very nice jazz sample. And I'm not gonna lie, that beginning reminds me very much of Kanye West's Crack Music, but that's beside the point. So what we're gonna do with this sample is we're gonna chop it on the bass. And an easy trick that you can use to chop the bass is just take a EQ and do a low pass filter, and you just leave the low end below like 500 hertz, 400 hertz, right around there. And now the only thing that you're gonna be able to hear is the low end, the actual bass. And now based on that, you can listen to your bass and chop on the bass line. So here are the actual chops I made with this technique. So basically listen to how the bass sounds here. And this technique is powerful because if you don't know how to chop your samples properly, usually what will happen is your chord progressions are not gonna work. But here, if you just focus on the low end of your sample, which is the bass of your sample, and you just make the bass sound good, which is way easier to just make the bass sound good, then it doesn't really matter what's in the high end. If the bass works, then the high end is gonna work as well. So let me actually turn off the EQ that was cutting off all the high end, and now listen to this. Right, the progression works perfectly fine here. And if you just chop the bass and focus on the bass, your progressions will always work. And by the way, if you want to learn how to chop samples like this, or you just want my or others' help with your beats, then check out Sample Academy. It's first link in the description, and we currently have a free trial for everybody, so just check it out. Okay, so now to process this sample, I might just do the standard Cymatics origin to cut out the high end and EQ to cut out the low end, and this is gonna make our sample sound like this. Right, it's very nice. We have a lot of space for the rest of our instruments, but here's where the magic happens. So basically I wanted to export this loop, but in Ableton, a shortcut to export is Ctrl-Shift-R. And what I did by mistake is I just had this entire sample selected and I just clicked Shift-R without clicking the Control, which reversed my entire sample. And just listen to how this sounds. Right, it's way more unique than before. So this is what I actually stuck with. So the next thing I added is very simple drums. So I just added this kick and this snare. And as you can see, I just added analog clip to it, LA2A, and another analog clip to just make them hit harder. And this is how they sound with the sample. So if you hear them just with the sample, they sound a little bit off, but trust me, in the full beat, it's gonna sound way better. So then I used this bass in Analog Lab, and I added a chorus to it to make it sound wider. Then I make this pattern with it. Right, we already got that like dark vibe going on. So next I wanted to add this Juno 6, and I played the same note into different octaves to just make it sound way bigger. And here is how that sounds. And as you might have heard, I just added this pitch bend here, so it sounds super nice. Right, now it's time to just arrange out the beat, and so here's how I did that. But one interesting thing here is I just rendered out the beat, and then I reversed it again here for the intro to just give us a little bit of a nicer drop. So this is how the reversed part sounds by itself. And here's how the full beat of the bass chopping technique sounds. And so next up we got vocal chopping. So vocal chopping is similar to bass chopping, but as you might have figured, instead of focusing on the bass, we're gonna be focusing on the vocals. So to show this technique off, we will use my recreation of Kanye West's Good Life. So for Good Life, Kanye samples Michael Jackson PYT, and it sounds like this. So I bet that already sounds familiar to you. So one advice for when you're looking for samples for vocal chopping is you need to look for very distinct vocal phrases. So let me show you what that means. Basically, Kanye takes this sample and chops it up like this. So just listen to the phrases he chopped out. Right, so from the entire sample, he just took the phrases that stood out the most to him and he made his chops on those phrases. So overall, this sample has very distinct vocal phrases, but the ones that I showed you are the ones that Kanye chose. And so now that you actually have your vocal phrases, you can take them and rearrange them to what sounds good to you. And so Kanye does it in this way. As you can see, the only thing he did really is chopped out this portion right here and this portion right here, and then replaced it with this little chop right there, right? But once you listen to this, it's already gonna sound like Good Life. Right, so next what we're gonna do with this to make it sound more like Good Life is we're just gonna take it and pitch it all down one semitone, and then I'm gonna just add a little bit of Cymatics Origin to cut off the high end and AEQ to cut off the low end. And this is how our final sample will sound. So one important thing with vocal chopping here that I want to show you is that when you're chopping on the vocals, you need to be careful for the drums. Because if you listen to the sample, you have a kick here at the beginning and a snare here. And same here, a kick and a snare. And here's another snare as well. So if we move this around, so let's say the kick would be on 2 and the snare would be on 3, which is weird, then it might not work as well. Right, that already sounded weird. 2 snares right after one another. So when you're chopping on the vocal phrases, you still need to be careful whether your vocal phrases have drums within them like kicks and snares. And if they do, then you need to be careful with the placement of those kicks and snares, because if you just place them off, it's not gonna work as well. Right, so next what we'll do is we'll add the drums. So basically we'll just take this snare, this kick, this closed hat, and this clap. And so this is the pattern of the drums in Good Life, and here is how that sounds. Right, next thing is I'm just gonna take this bass, and here is the pattern Kanye builds. So he basically just follows the sample with the bass. Then next thing we're gonna take this synth and build chords with it on top of our bass line, and it sounds like this. And lastly, we just take this sound and make this very simple lead melody with it, which it basically just follows the sample. So here's how it sounds. And just quickly, if you want access to this Kanye West remake and many others, then just check out Sample Academy. It's first link in the description, and we currently have a free trial for everybody, right? And if we put everything together, we're gonna get Good Life, which was our example for vocal chopping. So here is how it sounds. And the fourth method is the 3-1 method. So it's one of the simpler methods, similar to the loop method. So basically the entire idea of this technique is that you have 2 sections and you repeat section 1 3 times, and then you play the second section and you loop that. So I use this sample called To Say I Love You. So basically those 2 sections is what I'm gonna use. And so I arrange them out in this way. So you can see that my first section, I use it 3 times. And then I have my 4th section with just an additional chop from the first section. So it just loops better back into the first section. But basically this is section 1 and this is section 2. So we loop the first section 3 times, and then we have the second section. And basically the last fourth bar, the second section, it gives us kind of this sense of resolution to the entire loop, and it gives the song a sense of progression. So here's how that sounds. Right, so next what I'm gonna just do to it is I'm gonna, as usual, add a little bit of Cymatics Origin to cut off the high end and an EQ to both cut off the low end and the high end. So here's how it sounds with the processing. So next I find this drum break called iPattern Blindness, and I literally just warp it to tempo. So here is how that sounds. Right, so one problem I have with this beat now is that it's still a little empty and it's still missing some frequencies. So I basically take this sound and I build out this pattern with it, and I slightly just pan it to the left. That's pretty much everything for this beat. It's not really complex, but it shows off the 3-1 method. So if I just arrange this all out, here's how our 3-1 method beat sounds. And the last sampling technique, rhythm chopping. So as you might have guessed, rhythm chopping is basically just chopping the sample on the rhythm, and usually those are the more prominent drum hits, like the kicks and the snares. So for this beat, I use the sample from our weekly samples on Sample Academy, and it sounds like this. So basically what I did to it is I put it into a sampler, so I chopped it on every kick and snare so I can play it on my keyboard. Right, so from there I just started playing around with it, and this is the pattern I came up with. So one thing you have to watch out for with this method is where you place your snares, because basically like we have this chop and this chop, and they both have snares. So if I place that snare on like 1 and 3, it will sound very weird because usually snares aren't there. So you gotta watch out for where you place your snares. Then what I did with the sample is I pitched it up 3 semitones. And then I just added a little bit of an EQ to cut out the low end. So next I found this bass on Analog Lab, and I just added an analog clip to it to make it a little bit warmer. Right, and I just built this very simple pattern with it. Right, so next I wanted to add my drums. So here is the kick I used, my snare, and the shaker. And I just made this very simple pattern with it. And lastly, I just thought it would be nice to add some chords to the song. So I used this sound. And here are the chords I built with it, and this is how it sounds. So it's very subtle, but it still adds something to the beat. And that's pretty much everything. If I just arrange this all out, here is how the final beat sounds.